All right, welcome along to our second hour. So we have a question from way I think about why security administrator role with eligible assignment type cannot access DLP policies. I can't go into the specifics here. Again, when I get to DLP, maybe mention it again. At the end of the day, for example, an administrator, a global administrator does not have access to users' mailboxes by default. A global administrator does not have access by default to OneDrive for Business for users. They can be given access, they can configure their own access, but they are not given that out of the box. So same thing with the DLP and the security administrator role, right? There are different roles. There are e-discovery roles, there are compliance managers, and again, it varies. But you can certainly give that role if you so wish it. But there are certain things, like I said, you know, an administrator by default does not have access to a user's mailbox by default. So it is the way it is configured out of the box. All right, so who wants another security challenge? Who wants to see how secure their own environments are? I know you all do. So again, run Task Manager for me. Okay, then go down and locate a service called LSASS. So LSASS. All right, so again, let me do this by name. Maybe that'll make it a bit easier. So I want to jump around a bit. So can anybody tell me what LSASS is? What task or what that executable actually is? Does anybody know what LSASS is? For an extra prize, an extra bar of chocolate. Anybody tell me what lsass.exe is? Well, it's the local, Mimikatz is what acts against it. So this is where your local credentials are held. So these are the credentials that you use when it logs into services, logs into applications. Now, if you find the LSASS and you right mouse click on it, you'll see there's an option here to create a dump file. All right, so right mouse click on lsass.exe and then select the option to create a dump file, and it should say something like this. If it doesn't say that access was denied, what that means is that an attacker, if they got access to your system, could dump the local credential file that is in memory and then run Mimikatz, which is a way to extract those credentials from that dump file. So your system should not allow a dump file of the local credential manager to take place. If it can, your environment is not secure and needs to be addressed. Okay. So yes, LSASS is effectively where the credentials are that are used in the current environment. So it's the caching, think of the memory, location of where any of the credentials may be stored, and it could be, anything current, your NTLM, third-party applications, all of that sort of stuff could be in there. And if you can dump that to a file and then run Mimikatz across it, either on that same machine or extracting it, then you can pull out password logins and all that sort of thing. So you shouldn't be able to dump lsass.exe. If you can, bad news, you need to, again, look at securing that as a best practice. All right, so the next thing that you need to go in and check is the fact that you have your auditing logs basically enabled. So you'll see in this tenant, it is not enabled. My logging is not turned on. So none of the logs are being captured, and that is off by default in most tenants. So most of the deep auditing logging is disabled in Microsoft environments, right? So this is what the new interface looks like, and this is what the older interface will look like if it's indeed turned off. Now, if we go and look at my environment here, we'll close Secure Score, and we'll go to the security page. Maybe I need to go back to that page now, it seems. Yes, it would seem I need to do that. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have closed that. Let me go to the security page. Am I... okay, doesn't want to play ball with me again. That's annoying. Okey. So I'll have to get to it from the front page. Sorry about this. The menuing option is being a bit painful. Where are we? Security. Here we go. There we go. Now, what was I doing? Oh, yeah, that's right. So if I go in here, or was it compliance? It might actually, oh, yeah, sorry, here it is here. So I see audit down here. You'll see here that my auditing is not turned on for this tenant, which means, as you can see, I can't query the audit log to see what's been happening. And remember, I've got to go in and generally enable this auditing by default. It's not generally enabled by default. So make sure that every tenant that you look after, you've gone in and enabled the auditing so you can track and follow any issues. Because if there is a breach or is there a problem, you need to be able to go back to the logs and basically run a query like this that is going to show you the results and allow you to export them and view them and track down anything in your environment. So please go in and make sure that your audit logs in Microsoft 365 are enabled. And the way that we got to that is we went to the Security Center and we scrolled down here to audit, and we made sure that there's not a banner across the top there telling me to basically go in and turn those settings on. All right, so again, make sure that your auditing capability looks like this. And remember, it'll only, when you turn that on, it's going to capture the logs from that point forward, not beforehand. Okay, so it's why it's important to turn it on from day one. Now, the other important logs that are turned on by default are your Azure AD logs. And again, to see where these are, you'll need to go to Azure AD, bottom right, left-hand corner, you'll see sign-ins under monitoring. And this is what your Azure AD logs would look like. So if I go out to my environment, and do I have a, no, I don't. So let's go to portal.azure.com. And when this loads, we would go to our Azure AD. So there's our Azure AD. And if we scroll down, you'll see here is the monitoring, sign in, audit logs, blah, blah, blah. Go to sign in logs. And you'll be able to see all the logging for the sign-ins that has taken place over a recent period. And my advice to you is to add a filter, add a status, and then change the status to failure, and then go in there and have a look in your environment to see if there are basically any failures. So you'll see here I've got one failure sign-in. So if I click on this, you'll see that this will give me a fair bit of information as to what's happened. All right, you'll see here that it was a Windows sign-in. Okay, you'll see that the client was a mobile app and desktop client. And if I go into things like device info, it'll show me it was a Windows device. The Windows device was Azure AD joined. It'll show me the authentication, where the password is, whether I needed two-factor authentication, right, whether conditional access played a role here, and so on. So go in and spend some time with your Azure AD logs so that you can go in and be comfortable with how to extract information, how to add filters. You'll see here that you can download these to a JSON, to a CSV file. You can export the data settings. You can add additional columns in there if you want, okay, to give you specific fields, but there's a lot of information in there. Now, if you look at your audit logs are going to tell you the activity from an Azure point of view, typically device login and that sort of thing. You're not going to see, file uploads and all that sort of stuff. That's going to appear in these audit logs here in Microsoft 365. But let's close that out. Where did my portal go? Yeah, here it is. So again, the second place you need to be familiar with is the Azure AD logs. The sign-in logs are your friends, and also the audit logs are also your friends. So a question from Cameron here: when enabling Office 365 auditing, it prompts that organization settings need to be updated. You'd have to look at what that is, but there is a PowerShell setting, which I think off the top of my head it is related to. So let me see if I can pull it up quickly off the top of my head. Just do a search for it. I think it's called, what's it called? Enable-organization. I think it's organizational settings, maybe. Yeah, there you go. Organization customization, there you go. So that's how you would do it in PowerShell. So go in and have a look at that. So just do a search on that and see what it says. But basically, the reality is Microsoft won't turn on a lot of the logging and the places where the audits are stored and all that sort of housekeeping information, because if people don't want it, why, and never look at it, why would you turn it on? It's going to save Microsoft disk space, processing power, and so on. So at the end of the day, you should turn it on. It's no additional cost to enable all this stuff, and it gives you a hell of a lot of information. So again, make sure that that is turned on. Now, the next question is okay, how long are these logs kept for? Okay, so these logs are kept depending on the SKU that you have. Now, if we're talking about Microsoft 365 Business Premium, we are in this one here where we have Azure AD Premium P1. So normal Office 365 will only keep it for typically 7 to 30 days, where Azure AD Premium will keep it for 30 days. And again, you can extend that out to 90 days if you have Azure AD P2. All right, now there are additional options to do log shipping. So to take the logs once they're older than 30 days, 90 days, and save them into another storage capability. You know, that's a manual process, and you can build an automated sequence to do that, but it's not, you know, a checkbox sort of thing. My other advice to you is that we will talk about again is that Azure Sentinel gives you 90 days worth of logs. So if you are shipping your logs into Azure Sentinel, which I showed you before, that will keep the logs no matter what the SKU for 90 days. Okay. Now, they're the Azure AD logs. You may not be aware, but there are also mailbox logs, what they call mailbox auditing logs. Now, if you go to the link that's provided down below, you will see which ones are enabled and not enabled by default. There are 3 levels, admin, delegate, and owner. And some of these are enabled, some of these are not enabled. So, for example, the copy action is not audited for delegate and owner, but it is for admin. So my advice, once again, is go and turn all of these things on. There's no downside to you. There's no additional cost. There's no loss of processing. You're not penalized. Turn it on. Now, the challenge with mailbox actions here is they can only be enabled with PowerShell. So you would need to look at, you know, doing that with PowerShell. Okay, so I have, if you go to my GitHub repository, which we'll look at in a bit more detail when we get a bit further along, but if you go to github.com/director/CIA/Office 365, which I didn't spell right somewhere. I left out an F. Office 365. You'll see that there is a range of scripts in there. We'll talk about some of these in a little while, but all of these are free for you to take advantage of, have a look at, and build from there. So again, go out, feel free to go out and have a look at those. So we've got our audit logs, we've got, which we need to turn on. Our Azure AD logs should be accumulating, but do have a limited lifespan. You have a minimal set of mailbox logs that are enabled. My advice is go and turn them all on. No downside. You want as much information as you can. There is nothing that you need to do for SharePoint or OneDrive. Okay, so all of those audit settings are now automatically maximized and put into the unified audit logging in Microsoft 365. So if I give you a tenant here, so let's go in and have a look at a active tenant. Go into admin. Go into compliance, hopefully. Show all. Let's see if we can, actually, I should have gone from the home page though. So let's go from that home page as we went before. So go to security. And let us look at auditing when it comes up. And no, I don't want to take a quick tour, but it's going to give me a quick tour, isn't it? Go away. Okay. So we get them to hit audit. So this is an active environment. So what I can do is I say, basically show me the, there we go. So basically show me the logs between the 26th and the 2nd of September. The activities I'm going to look for is what's something that happened recently. Okay, copied files. So let's see how many copied files I did. Okay, and the users, I'll just put in myself in this environment, and then I go search. So that's going to go through all the events between those two dates that match a file copy. It's going to spit back when it does that, what the IP address was that was actioned on, the user, the activity, the item, and you'll see that I've also got the capability to download all the results. Well, that was a bad option to pick, wasn't it? There's nothing there happening, but you get the idea. So again, if you haven't used the audit log search, just go in there and have a look, and you'll see there are lots and lots of options that you basically, can choose from. All right, so there are hundreds of individual activities that you can search, and this is why you want, this sort of thing turned on, so you can go in and audit that if need be. All right, and you'll notice that we've also got a retention policy here as well, so we can create audit retention policies, but this may require some additional licensing. Right, so again, go in here and click the Learn More option, and it will tell you what sort of retention policies that you can set depending on the license. But importantly, make sure that you do have, your licensing, your auditing logs enabled across all your individual services, because many of them are not generally enabled by default. Okay, so we did a demo. So the next thing is alerts, right? So alerts are typically email alerts, and I will caution you against overloading yourself with alerts. It's all well and good to say, I want email alerts, I want to know what's going on, but again, be very careful by the fact it's very easy to overload yourself. So an email alert would look something like this, low severity, what happened, where it went on, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and you can click on the link there to go in and investigate it if you want. Now, you go in and create alerts in the security area. We basically have a number of alerts that are created for you automatically. So if you have a look, there are things called protection alerts. Okay, so these are the newer default options. And you'll see that when you look at protection alerts, there are two sorts. There is the sort that is bolded, the bottom one, and one that is basically normal font. The bolded ones are the ones that Microsoft provides by default, and you largely can't manipulate the individual settings. You can turn them off, you can turn them on, but you largely can't make any changes to how that alert is operating. The other one, the one above it, is a custom alert. So you've created a custom alert that allows you to set it up and basically do whatever you want. So if we go in here and go back to here, and have we got alerts here? I think we have. There we go, where I did see it. No, that's simulation policies, auditing. All right, so let me go back to, let's go back to finding it the long way. So let's go to this way. And go to security this way, so it looks the same. Okay, so go to security here. And here are our alerts here. Okay, so you'll see here that I can view the alert policies. So in my list here, the basically you'll see that when it comes up, there will be bolded alerts. So see anything that's bolded there are Microsoft alerts. So if I click on one of these, you'll see that all I can do is basically turn it on and turn it off, and you'll see that some sections of this alert cannot be edited. because they are set as the default policy. So they are provided by Microsoft. The amount of alerts you get depends on your license. So if you've got E5, you'll get more, more options there. You can go up here and create a new alert. So this is how you could go in and create. Let's go in and just show you. So I can go in here and say the severity is medium. I can go in and say the category is this. I can then go in here and say the activity is, let's say password. Has it got an option? No, let's try email maybe. Oh, there we go. So let's say malicious email detected. And then I can add more conditions, blah, blah, blah. And that's how it's going to get triggered and who's going to receive it and so on. And I can set limits up to that limit. Okay, so these are known as protection alerts. And like I said, you do get a number of default ones out of the box, and Microsoft allows you to configure any additional ones in your environment that makes sense. Now, we also have something called activity alerts. Activity alerts are the older style of alerts that are still there, but Microsoft is preferring you to use the protection alerts. So again, the way that we can find that without having to go to the URL, let me try and see if I can get that to display. It doesn't look as though it wants to display. Normally there's a link that will appear up here. So it doesn't look as though it wants to appear. So let me go to the direct URL, because again, Microsoft would prefer that we don't go there. So these are called activity alerts. You'll see in here that I've got no activity alerts at all, but I can go in and create my own policy. All right, so I go in here and make it a custom policy, send this alert when, and I go in here and craft this in a similar way. So I say, what sort of actions are going to create an activity alert, and I can go in and configure those if I want. So you've got protection alerts, and you also have activity alerts. My advice would be is focus on protection alerts, but the activity alerts do have a couple of nice options. So for example, I can get an alert when the company information changes. So there's an alert you can set as an activity alert that will tell you, for example, when the partner of record is changed, when the billing is changed, when a credit card payment option is changed. So that's why I still like using activity alerts, because they do give you a certain amount of information that protection alerts at this point in time, unfortunately, don't give you. But again, you will have a number of standard protection alerts. They'll be set up, but they won't basically be going anywhere. So if you want, go in and redirect them to your service desk or to some other event log that you can then get information. But again, be very careful because it's very easy to overload yourself with too many alerts. Question, does the security audit keep a log trails of the security analyst queries that he uses? No. So advanced threat hunting is part of tools like Sentinel, right? That log, that unified audit logging I've showed you, right, is the basic base logs, right? The advanced hunting stuff is up here in the advanced packages like Defender for Office 365, for Sentinel, and all that sort of stuff. So those sort of capabilities, they take advantage of what's in the unified audit logging, but that is not basically connected to that advanced hunting in any way, apart from the fact that those logs are being shipped up into things like Sentinel, log analytics, and so on. Alerts go to tenant admins. Where is the group setting for that? That is just a standard, what is the word? A constant in the Microsoft tenant. So there is a tenant admins group or variable that includes all tenant administrators. That's just a standard within the tenant. There's no way you can adjust that. Anybody who's a global admin is considered to be, tenant admin. You can adjust that. You can change that by default. That's just a standard constant within inside the tenants, known as tenant admins. Any other questions? My advice is probably that you don't want to receive email alerts. You want the alerts to happen, but you want those alerts to be pushed into Cloud App Security. You want them to be pushed into Sentinel. You don't want to be bombarded with hundreds and hundreds of alerts telling you that things are suspect, because 99% of the alerts are going to be, again, false positives. So don't overload yourself is my advice. Let the machine do the hard work. Create the log, create the alerts, yes, but send them to, like I said, Cloud App Security, send them to Sentinel let them do the hard work. Okay, all right. So I think we've answered most of those questions. So let us move on. So where is the attacker, right? The people you're up against, where are they going to start? As we've talked about, they are going to start with email, right? They are going to try and convince people to click largely on an email, and they're going to get them to try and execute something on the workstation, right? At the end of the day, the majority of attacks are going to require execution of something, a script, an exe, something on the workstation. And the most common way of achieving that is by using an Office macro, okay, to launch the process. So therefore, it's going to come from an email. They open an attachment, Word document, Excel, whatever, Adobe, and that then runs an executable, a script or whatever that then causes issues. Now, how do people get access to environments? Again, the idea is when I create a phishing environment or a phishing attack, I'm looking for the credentials. I'm looking to capture the user's login and the password. I will also try and guess it. There are databases and databases out there. So again, if you don't believe me, if we go out and have a look at this. So if you put in 1, 2, 3, how many is that? 10,000. Right, so if you do a search for 10,000 passwords, I'm pretty confident that you will find a Wikipedia article giving you the 10,000 most common passwords ranked by commonality. So all you do is basically copy and paste this as an attacker, put it into a script, and then bang away at users' environments. That's how simple it is, right? The 10,000 most common passwords are on Wikipedia for anybody. Now, the other one we've got here is the non-approved apps, right? So what should they be using? What shouldn't they be using? Okay. Shadow IT, all that sort of stuff, right? So the most common one generally we find out there is Dropbox. So most people put on Dropbox to move information around. The trade-off here is if you try and be too secure, if you lock things down too much, if you make it too difficult, your users will simply find a less secure way around the barriers you've created. So again, going back to that original triangle, you have to trade off usability versus security, right? You can't make it impossible for users to get their job done. Your job primarily, even above security, is to facilitate users' productivity. Okay, you need to do that as securely as possible, but you can't prevent the users from getting their job done, because if you do, they will just find a way around it. They will work out a less secure way to get their job done. So the biggest issue, as we mentioned, is email. Why is that? Well, email was never designed to be secure. It's anonymous. You can send any email to anybody to be from anyone with any content, and generally it's accepted. That's the problem. And we can't change that because that's the way the internet plumbing works. We have to defend against it with that known environment. Now, the place to start that is your DNS records. Every single domain should have an SPF, a DKIM, and a DMARC record. Every single domain. Now, when you create Office 365, it will force you to do an SPF, right? So SPF is basically telling systems that the IP address that is the email sending, the actual computer, matches the domain. So it says this IP address or this server is allowed to send emails from this domain. So therefore, you're going to have an SPF record for your domain or the custom domain in Office 365, plus anything else. So if you use MailChimp, any of those bulk mail senders, you're going to have to adjust the SPF record to suit. My first piece of advice is to make sure that that SPF record is correct. Now, you can use things like mxtoolbox.com to verify that. Remember that SPF does have a limit. SPF records are interpreted. They read the records when they verify it. If it's too long, it times out and bad emails get through. So again, make sure that your SPF record conforms to standards, is in the right format, double check, verify that it is doing what it should, and there are no errors in there, especially if you're adding additional servers. Now, the two records we don't see commonly are DKIM and DMARC. So DKIM basically puts a cryptographic header, a private public key pair, inside every email that is sent from your organization. Now, there is no concern that it will block emails because the receiver of your emails needs to be DKIM enabled to even take advantage of it. And remember that if they are enabled and the DKIM is correct, then it will go through. So there's no reason not to implement DKIM. It is a simple way to stamp every email as coming from your domain using cryptography. Okay. You basically need to set up 2 DNS records once, and then the job's done. That's it. That's all you need to basically do. So again, it's a no-brainer in my books that everybody set up DNS for their DNS for their environments. Okay. Now DMARC works by aligning or measuring the alignment of SPS and DKIM. So does the SPF record and the DKIM point to the same servers, do the same thing? Are they aligned? And then it will take actions based on that. So you'll see that P is the action that it takes. So P can be none, don't do anything, basically report, quarantine, or reject. So reject is the most aggressive. My advice is that you set up DMARC as a no-brainer. You should be doing this, and you should set it to audit or report first. Okay, and those records can basically then be sent to the Microsoft, sent to a reporting service on your behalf. Okay. Now, one of the common questions is, okay, what's the reporting capabilities here? So if I go to this, which was just announced by Microsoft today, here we go. So this one, let me just copy this and put this where it needs to be. So Microsoft announced today, and this has been available for a while. So there's a company out there called Veil Mail. There are other ones that do it. Let me put the notes there for you, in the chat for you. So basically, this is a DMARC reporting service. So Valley Mail, allows you to do things like put your DNS and your DMARC in there and then create, these sort of reports to see the senders, to do all that sort of stuff. Where's this little reporty thing here? So you can then look at who's abiding by DMARC, who's failing DMARC, what that is. Now, what DMARC largely prevents is two things. One is it prevents somebody else pretending to be you. Okay, so you've probably got a lot of bounce backs from people who said, oh, you've been sending me spam or email, and it's not even you, but someone else has been using, your domain. The other benefit of DMARC is it helps in anti-spoof intelligence. Because if a person sends from a Gmail address but pretends to be the boss from inside the company, that's an email coming from outside that's pretending to be from the inside. DMARC is going to add additional weight to why that is an incorrect assumption. So again, my advice to you is to go and enable DKIM and DMARC for all the environments, all the domains. And DKIM is very straightforward. You basically set the 2 DNS records, you go into Microsoft 365, click a button, and it's turned on. DMARC, again, is just 2 DNS records, nothing to configure in Microsoft 365, and you need to choose what level that you are, but certainly set it up to do auditing initially and then become more aggressive down the track. So the way that I do it is that I would suggest that you do the same, is I put the DNS records inside Azure DNS. If you weren't aware, Azure allows you to have DNS records. The benefit of doing this is that I can programmatically add and remove records using PowerShell. It also gives me a much better reporting. So if I look at my dashboard here, I don't know if I got it on this dashboard. Maybe I do. What have I got here? Let me find that other dashboard with DNS actually on it. Whoops, not what I wanted. So one of the other benefits that it does provide is this enhanced reporting capabilities. So let me go to another tenant. Too many tenants. Now, where did that go? Let me just move that. Where did that go? Right out of the way up here. Okay. Too many tenants, There we go, out of the way, there we go. So if we go to this other tenant I've got, I wanted to look at the dashboard. So if I go in here and go down to monitoring, here we go. So you'll see that I've got my dashboard for my DNS. So you can see here, these are the query volumes for the DNS for one of the domains here. And you'll see that on August the 26th at 9 a.m. for some reason, there was a significant amount of queries on that domain, and maybe something that I want to go in and investigate. So that's why I like using things like Azure DNS. It gives me the ability to programmatically add DNS records, manage them. Costs me, $3 a month, if that, for the domain, and I get that sort of reporting out of it. So let's go and check the questions. Does the security audit keep? No, we talked about that one. Alerts go to, we talked about that one. Okay, so we're all good. Okay. So again, go in and make sure that you have your DNS records set for SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And there's plenty of documentation on how to set that up, what they are. They're basically a one-shot deal. You set them up and then you never have to worry about them again. So again, very, very straightforward. Now, the next question I've got for you is, what about your park domains? If you've got domains that are sitting on, just there and not pointing to anything, and they haven't got things like DKIM and DMARC on them, then somebody else could spoofing or pretending to be you, or using them to do bad things. So again, think about all those domains that are sitting out there that are currently unused or unassigned, let's call it. Somebody else could use that as a spoofing domain because it hasn't got the DKIM and the DMARC prevention. Now, one of the big benefits of the Microsoft 365 solution here is that we're going to get this end-to-end integrated capability. So we're going to go everything from the workstation, Windows 10, iOS, Android, through to our Microsoft 365, through to data loss prevention, through to cloud app security. We've got Azure information protection. We'll talk about much of this. All of this is in one environment. All of this can be managed via the console. All of it can be reported, via dashboards. All of it can be accessed programmatically using things like PowerShell. All of it integrates really well together. That's the big advantage here. Okay, and that's why I'm a big advocate for these sort of solutions, is because the integration is superior. That's what you need these days. To work smarter is you need the integration, so you're not flicking between multiple solutions here to try and get a resolution. All right, so again, the first thing that I look at basically every morning or every day is going to be my Azure Sentinel environment. So I can go in and basically see, is there anything that the machine thinks I should worry about? Okay, so I need to go in and address it. So again, if we just come back here quickly, so you'll see here, this is my production environment. You'll see I've got a failed login. So let me go in and have a look at this. This is typically what I do. I will go in here and say, oh, that's interesting. A failed login. Where has that happened? So I'd have a look at this and say, oh, that's interesting. Someone's tried to log into SharePoint. I can click on the IP address and I can see, okay, there's been a couple of attempts here. Right, so it happened, then, and it happened there, and look, it's happening from Silverdale, New Zealand. I can go in and, track this information in greater detail. So that to me is the smart way, to approach the options here. The machine's doing the hard work and just letting me know what I need to worry about. And all of that's coming thanks to the integration and the connection and the signals all flowing up into, a fantastic tool like Sentinel. What is the best and most effective way to deploy all these audit security logs and across customers at the same time? So Tony, the answer to every question, Tony, is either SharePoint or PowerShell. And in this case, the answer is PowerShell. You can do it in many, many different ways. My advice to you is to use PowerShell. However, I would suggest that if you haven't or you're not aware of this, let me go back to my browser here. If you do a search for Microsoft, Microsoft 365 Lighthouse. So Lighthouse is the way that you manage multiple tenants here. Okay, so if you have a look and do a search for Lighthouse, so Lighthouse gives you multi-tenant management. I'll put the link in the chat there for you. The idea is there are some prerequisites around what licensing you have, and you need to be a CSP partner, and you also need to have set up delegated admin access. Okay, but it's going to give you that multi-tenant capability. Now, I will caution you, right? Now, if you set up Lighthouse or any other technology that allows multi-access to customers' tenants, and you get compromised or you have an insider attack or you have a rogue employee, they potentially have full access to all those customers if you've done that. So again, be very, very aware you're creating a single risk point that an attacker could take advantage of using these aggregation tools, no matter what they are. And that goes for RMM tools, it goes for anything. So again, keep that in mind. Now, the solution that Microsoft provides for that is something called Privileged Identity Management, PIM, which we'll talk about in a more advanced session. It is escalation of privileges on demand. So if I need to be an admin, I escalate for that period. I get audited, tracked, and approved, and then after the time period, I get de-escalated. So yes, Lighthouse is the way to do multi-tenant from a web interface, but be very careful about the supply chain issues that may raise in your environment. So I'm not a big fan of it for exactly that reason. I think that creates more vulnerabilities than it's basically worth, but that's my interpretation. Okay. How to authenticate temporarily access path. So there's, Chris, I wouldn't suggest the temporary access pass. That's probably not a good way of doing it. It is, you could do it that way, but I wouldn't do it that way. But yeah, look, there are lots of options to do that. Are there any other questions before once again we pause for our scheduled occupational health and safety required break? Are there any questions? Will you be covering the use of Compliance Manager in the training session, specifically the use of the Essential 8's premium template? Not really, because at the end of the day, the Essential 8 is not specific. Okay, the thing here is to look at the specific settings for the protection, right? So this is security, which is very different from compliance, right? So compliance is a very different kettle of fish here, okay? And the Essential 8 largely is a set of guidances, a set of practices you should follow. It's not going to give you the granularity that you're probably after, okay? So the Essential 8 is great, don't get me wrong, it's a good framework, but it's not going to give you the specifics. So what you want for the specifics is 2101, I think it is. 21H1 hardening. So a better one, if I can find it, is, where is it? I will have to go and find it. There is a guide, a hardening guide. Let's have a look here. Maybe from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre that talks about the actual individual settings. I will need to go and find that so I can show you, which I'll do when we come back. I thought it would have come up. Okay, maybe I aren't calling it. So let's try one more. 21H1. What's this say? Sites default files. This may be it. Let's have a look. Here we go. What's it doing? Open file. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Okay, so there are these sort of documents out from people like the Australian Cyber Security Centre, which you'll see are far more specific, right? So they tell you exactly what the settings are that you need to do. The Essential 8 is going to give you guidance and, yeah, do auditing, do tracking, do whitelisting, but they're largely not going to give you this level of detail. You need to dig a little bit deeper into their environments to get that. But so I'm not going to cover that particularly specifically unless we get, unless we get the time for that. We recently attempted to run the Essential 8 Premium template against Clients 365, and soon found out they require Compliance Manager Premium Assessment add-on. Yeah, so at the end of the day, the Essential 8 is aimed at enterprises, as the starting point, as with Microsoft 365 is aimed at enterprises. Okay, so my advice to you is to build your own environment to do this and not rely on third parties. Just have a look at the templates, maybe run it in your own system, run it in a demo environment to get a feel for it. But I'm not a big advocate of just applying those things blindly. I would certainly take them and understand them and build my own environment. So again, I'm not a big fan of taking what you've done there and just applying it, because you will find licensing restrictions and so on. Now, most of those settings will be valid in Microsoft 365 Business Premium, but they're simply not surfaced using the standard, sort of commands. So that's why I prefer to do it. Look at it from the opposite end of the spectrum, from the ground up, rather than applying a template that I've found, especially from the government. So again, the idea here is there are plenty of other best practices out there. They just require a bit of work. And again, I'm not a big fan of just applying templates that are specified out there personally. Does Microsoft have a free securities tool to harden an audit and provide a report? So at the end of the day, the answer is yes. The answer is always going to be yes. They've always had these tools. Okay, and again, we're not talking about Windows 10 at this point. We're waiting to take a break so we can talk about email. We haven't even got to the devices. We've got a long way to go yet before we even get to talking about devices. But the answer is yes, they have certainly all of these. But again, I will show you a tool that I've written that basically is a much better tool than that, but you can do it in PowerShell. That's my answer. So the tools exist, but I prefer writing my own tools. Any other questions where's my clock, before we take a break? All right, so let me stop the recording.